In 1994, Rwanda was plunged into the darkest period of its history. In just 100 days, more than 800,000 people were killed. The victims were mainly Tutsi, but also included Hutu opponents. To understand this tragedy, we must go back more than a century in time, the pre-colonial era, the 19th century. In the 19th century, three groups of people inhabit the land of 1,000 hills. The Twa live from hunting, gathering and pottery, the Hutu from agriculture, the Tutsi from cattle breeding. A certain mobility exists between these socio-economic groups. They form a common civilization with a common language, Kinyarwanda. An elite of Tutsi cattle farmers dominates the state. The division into so-called ethnic groups only comes about during colonization, the colonial period, 1890. The areas of present-day Burundi and Rwanda became a German protectorate in 1890 and are entrusted to Belgium after World War I. 1919. The colonists based their administration on the Tutsi aristocracy and give them priority in the distribution of government jobs and education. 1930s. In the 1930s, the Belgian authorities imposed the idea of ethnic affiliation on identity cards. From that moment on, identification as Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa no longer depends on one's occupation or social position. It becomes fixed and is transmitted by birth. This and the pro-Tutsi policy of the colonists starts to divide Rwandan society. 1950. When the Tutsi elites call for independence in the 1950s, the colonists redraw their alliance to the benefit of the Hutu majority. 1959. This shift triggers the so-called Hutu Social Revolution of 1959. Tensions between Hutu and Tutsi lead to the death of about 20,000 Tutsi and the exile of 300,000 others. Independence, 1962. On 1st of July 1962, Rwanda becomes independent through a referendum, with the southern Hutu Gregory Kayibanda as its first elected president. The country quickly adopts a single-party model. Many Tutsi leave Rwanda, but without accepting their exile. Armed incursions by groups of exiles are on the rise in the 1960s. Tens of thousands of Tutsi from within the country are killed in retaliation for such acts. The invading Tutsi are referred to as Inyenzi, literally cockroaches. This term resurfaces before the genocide, its use being extended to include all Tutsi living in Rwanda. 1973. A division between the Hutu of the north and the south shakes the Rwandan government. General Major Juvenal Habyarimana from the north stages a coup. In 1973, he becomes president of the Second Republic. 1975. Discrimination against the Tutsi remains a reality, although the country goes through a period of relative stability. 1987. In the late 1980s, a famine disrupts the precarious balance and reignites tensions. The Tutsi diaspora in Uganda creates the Rwandan Patriotic Front. They form an alliance with the Hutu, who have been rejected by the system, and fight for the return of exiles and the overthrow of the regime. 1990. Civil War. On the 1st of October, the RPF initiates combat. The country is plunged into civil war. Thanks to the support of foreign forces, the RPF is quickly pushed back, and the government imprisons 13,000 Tutsi and Hutu opponents. Under domestic and foreign pressure, the regime moves towards a multi-party system and a transitional government. 1992. Hutu extremism emerges, and the youth wing of the MRND party transforms into a militia, the Interahamwe. 1993. As acts of violence increase, the media, such as Radio 2000 Collines, broadcasts anti-Tutsi propaganda. On the 4th of August 1993, peace negotiations led to the Arusha Accords, which foresee the sharing of power and the return of the people in exile. The United Nations sends 2,500 peacekeepers to accompany their implementation. Hopes are quickly shattered. The assassination of Burundian Hutu President Melchior Ndadaye by Tutsi soldiers on the 23rd of October strengthens extremism in Rwanda. The call for Hutu power echoes, and the situation becomes explosive. The genocide, the 6th of April, 1994. On the evening of the 6th of April 1994, the plane on which President Habyarimana was returning to Kigali was shot down shortly before landing. This attack, of which the perpetrators remain unknown to this day, marks the beginning of the 100 deadliest days in the country's history. The Rwandan army and the militias start setting up roadblocks. The first killings are carried out before dawn. Potential successors to the president are the first to be targeted. The Prime Minister, Agatha Uwilingiyimana, is assassinated by the army on the 7th of April, 1994, as are the 10 Belgian peacekeepers assigned to her protection. Belgium decides to withdraw from Unamir, which is thereby greatly weakened. The speed and organization of the perpetrators suggest a premeditated plan. An extremist interim government is installed, and the call for the extermination of the Tutsi is launched officially. The RPF immediately takes up arms. The massacres become widespread. They are carried out by the military and the militias, as well as by ordinary people manipulated by propaganda. The Tutsi are the main targets, but so are the Hutu who oppose the genocide. Men, women, and children are hunted down, even in churches and hospitals. They are tortured, raped, killed with machetes and firearms, and buried alive. The cruelty of the killers knows no limits. In this genocide of neighbors, people no longer see the other as a relative, colleague, or neighbor, but only as an enemy. They were not killed for what they did, but for what they were. The international community refuses to acknowledge the nature of the events in order to evade its duty to intervene. The 28th of June, 1994. It is only on the 28th of June, 1994, that the Special Rapporteur of the UN Human Rights Commission qualifies the events as a genocide against the Tutsi and assassinations of Hutu who opposed it. The end of the genocide. On the 4th of July, 1994, the RPF enters Kigali and puts an end to the bloodbath. The toll was heavy. At least 800,000 Tutsi and Hutu opponents were killed, and 2 million were forced into exile. The country is devastated, the infrastructure destroyed, the economy at a standstill. Every Rwandan was impacted, whether as a victim, witness, perpetrator, or all of these at once. Over 120,000 suspects were arrested in the aftermath of the genocide, but the capacity to bring them to justice was insufficient. In November 1994, the UN Security Council sets up the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda to prosecute those most responsible. Rwanda sets up specialized chambers in 1996. They deal with about 10,000 cases. Later, between 2005 and 2012, people's tribunals known as Gacaca courts will handle more than 1 million cases. Nearly 30 years after the events, more than 1 million people have been tried. Remembrance and justice efforts will continue for many years, accompanying Rwanda in its process toward reconciliation.